How's everybody doing today? Good. Are you warm enough? No? Never is. My name's Gavin Haverstick. I'm an acoustical consultant, and I spend my time making rooms sound better, and not with any equipment necessarily, but the actual sound quality of the room when it comes to architectural acoustics, the reverb, the slapback echo, things like that that you experience that unfortunately is one of the most overlooked aspects of your AV system is the room itself. You know, making sure that the room is handled properly is going to make all your equipment sound that much better. Little on my background, you don't have to read all of that stuff, but I'm a mechanical engineer by degree, but I've been a musician my whole life, so that's how I found myself in the world of acoustics. And my consulting firm, I basically design rooms from the ground up, or unfortunately, more often than not, I'm going out with acoustical testing gear and figuring out what the problem is and then figuring out a solution from there. So what we're talking about today is why is acoustical treatment or handling the acoustics of your room important? And I would say the biggest thing is that it's absolutely critical for good communication and efficient communication. If you have the best system in the world, but it's in a room that has a really long reverb time or has some really challenging acoustics, those sensitive systems pick up everything. You know, look at the room that we're in right now. This is a challenging environment, right? But you know, with proper placement of speakers and we're all close, we can hear pretty well. But with conferencing systems and other systems that are real sensitive, it's going to pick up all the room problems, and that's why it's important to treat them. It also allows you to fully realize the benefits of all this great equipment that you're seeing here today. You know, you could have, again, state-of-the-art equipment, but if it's in a poor room, sometimes the experience is lost. Improved speech intelligibility, less listener fatigue. You get more productivity when you're not having to struggle to hear things. So all this is very important when it comes to treating the space. So there's some common acoustical issues that you're going to find in rooms where you're putting AV systems. One of them would be the reverb time of the room, and that's essentially how long it takes for sound to decay in the space. That's one of the most common problems. There's also flutter echo and slapback, where you clap your hands in the room, it sounds like a ping pong ball bouncing back and forth, something like that. Noise issues from HVAC. You can hear when the HVAC kicks on here, it's fairly loud, and it happens in a lot of conference rooms, especially when you have ceiling hanging mics. They're right up next to the registers, and they can pick up a lot of that noise. You get comb filtering and phase cancellation. This happens a lot of times when you have microphones close to a reflective surface. You know, sound isolation is a big key as well. You want to keep the good noises in and the bad noises out, right? And so not only for privacy reasons, but also so there's no distractions, so that people are focusing on what's being presented. And speech intelligibility being poor in rooms is pretty common, and that all those factors play into that. So what type of materials are available? I mean, acoustical treatment has come a long way from the egg crates on a studio wall back in the day. I mean, there's some really nice looking products out there. One of the most common would be like a fabric covered fiberglass panel that would have a really nice decorative fabric, a lot of times have beveled edges to it. There's even images now that you can add to acoustical panels where you can take any high resolution image and make it the fabric covering on the panel. And it doesn't hurt the performance of the panel. You can take your corporate logo, you can do you know, artwork, anything like that. And when I work with a lot of boardrooms, conference rooms, meeting spaces for businesses, this is a great option because you're going to pay for artwork anyway. Why not make it work for you and make it something where it can help the acoustics of the space? This is a meeting hall in a company here in Indianapolis where the reverb time was 3.5 seconds before we got involved. And it was a very large space. It's a big company that has full company meetings in this room. And 3.5 seconds just isn't going to cut it. You clap your hands, it takes 3.5 seconds for that to die out. By the time we got finished, it got dropped down to about 1.5 seconds, and they were actually able to use the room. Before, it was pretty much unusable. This is a kind of events center, but also a live music venue that's no longer around here in Indianapolis. It's called the Music Mill, if you ever visited it. But they spent quite a bit on acoustical treatment, wall panels, fabric-covered panels on the wall. They also used a spray acoustical material on the ceiling. If you want to keep an industrial look, but still get some absorption out of it, there's options there as well. couple boardrooms here where it doesn't have to look bad. There's ways that you can blend it in with the aesthetic of the room and with different track systems and channel systems where you can customize it and make it look however you'd like, and there's thousands of fabrics available. So I'll do a quick case study of a very small conference room. It's only 16 foot by 16 foot approximately, about a 9-foot ceiling height. And in this room, I tested it using only 6 2-foot by 4-foot panels. Okay, so that's not a lot of treatment. I think it works out to be about 8% of the wall coverage. Okay, so I just want to show you how it doesn't take a lot to make a big difference. Here's some pictures of the room here. Microphones set up, doing testing. This is the reverb time graph, and what we're showing here is the blue line was the reverb time in seconds across the frequency spectrum. The bottom axis is frequency from low frequencies up to high, and the blue line was what I tested when there was no treatment in the room, so no panels whatsoever. The dotted line would be considered what is ideal for a room of this size given its application. The purple line was the result after those 6 panels got added to the room. Again, not a lot of treatment, but it got us closer to that dotted line and makes the reverb time, especially in the higher frequencies, which is where we get all of our speech intelligibility, all the consonant sounds like C and T and S, that's in the higher frequency register, and dropping that down so that it's more manageable allows people to hear speech better. There's also a metric called STI, which is a pretty easy metric. It's from 0 to 1. 1 would be perfectly intelligible. You'd hear everything that someone would say correctly. 0 would be like Charlie Brown's teacher, right? A garbled mess, just completely unintelligible. And in this room, just with 6 panels, we are able to increase that STI by about 6%, which actually doesn't seem like a lot, but in a small room that's already going to be fairly decent speech intelligibility because you're sitting so close to people, that improvement is nice. I also looked at impulse responses that show reflections over time. Sound travels at a speed of about 1.13 feet per millisecond. So if we know the time it took for a reflection to come back, we can trace that and figure out what surface it probably bounced off of in order to make that reflection. So this is the impulse response before treatment. You see these spikes that happen. Those are all reflective surfaces in the room. Then with those 6 panels, it looked like this. Okay? All those reflective peaks, a lot of them are reduced, and that's going to lead for a better result. The next one here, this is the frequency response of the room, and this is just showing you the level, the amplitude of each frequency across the spectrum. And notice that this is the before graph, and there's a lot of variance there. There's a lot of peaks and dips in the frequency response, and it's never going to be a flat line, but with treatment, again, just 6 panels, you're able to thin that out quite a bit. You see how much reflection, how much amplitude change there was in the higher frequencies. That's what's called comb filtering. It's called that because it looks like the teeth of a comb, and that gets thinned out quite a bit and is going to end up with a better intelligible result. Another thing that you have to think about in these spaces is what if sound is leaking in and out of the room? And unfortunately, that's not something that you can improve just by adding panels to the space. You know, you could cover your room 100% with absorption panels, and it won't make a bit of difference when it comes to the amount of sound that's leaking in or out of the room. Unfortunately, typically it's a construction approach. When you're trying to improve that, you have to add mass and decoupling devices to your walls and ceiling and floor sometimes. But there are certain things that you can do that are fairly easy in order to improve your isolation. You almost have to look at it like you're trying to waterproof a room, okay? So imagine filling up your room with water, and if there's any place where the water could potentially leak out, that's a spot where sound can leak out as well. A common thing in conference rooms, boardrooms, things like that would be the doors. If you look at the doors and there's air gaps around the perimeter, sound is just going to rifle through there. And it's something where you want to seal it up as airtight as possible and make sure that that sound doesn't have a chance to escape. You know, other aspects are HVAC systems. If your building is built in such a way where the HVAC is daisy chained from room to room, it shares the same duct and dumps into one room and then it dumps into the next and into the next, you could build a perfect room, but then that sound can get into that HVAC duct, travel down and dump into the next space. So that water analogy is sometimes nice to try to just troubleshoot things in your space. But unfortunately, if it's not those little air gaps, it's a little bit more difficult to handle than it is to make a room sound better, you know, because it does involve some construction and adding materials to the walls. that's all I had. I kind of batted cleanup, so I want to make sure that I was short. But if you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I'm also going to be at the listening lounge over here from 11 to 1. Any questions? All right. Thanks so much.